When Pope Francis mentioned the alarming warning from Our Lady, few could have imagined we would witness it so closely. The apparitions of Akita, Japan, in 1973, conveyed a message whose resonance is palpable today, a grim warning about the difficult times we are facing. One might think that the revelations from decades ago could not come to fruition now, but the signs are becoming increasingly evident. And while these prophecies are unsettling, they urge us to make an urgent conversion. But what impact do these warnings really have on our current lives? Dive into the words addressed to Sister Agnes Sasagawa to understand what Our Lady meant with the imminent punishment and loss of faith within the Church. The spiritual challenges we face today seem to be the fulfillment of these prophecies. Global events, faith crises, and divisions within the Catholic Church are just the visible part of the iceberg. In the face of these prophecies coming to life, it is time to reflect, pray, and act before it is too late. So, what does this hidden message beneath the surface of our current reality reveal? Imagine a small Japanese town where a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary begins to weep. This phenomenon, which occurred in Akita in 1973, is not just a legend. Sister Agnes Sasagawa, a dedicated religious, was the first to witness this miracle. Not only did she see the tears, but she also received profound messages from the Virgin, focused on faith and prayer. And that's not all. These events were accompanied by tangible miracles, like the healing of her deafness. So, what is the true meaning of these divine signs? The Church, though cautious regarding the apparitions, recognized Akita as an authentic event after thorough investigation. The messages received by Sister Agnes were clear, calling for urgent conversion and prayer. These words, spoken decades ago, still resonate today, reminding us that faith is a living flame that must be sustained daily. But how do these historical revelations connect to our contemporary spiritual situation? What happened in Akita was not an isolated case. It was a global call to re-evaluate our spiritual lives. The tears of the Virgin, a concerned mother, were a sign for humanity. But have we truly understood this message? And how does it fit into the context of the spiritual and social upheavals we live through today? This chapter in history is full of spiritual and historical nuances, underlining the importance of this event. How do these spiritual aspects influence our everyday lives? The 1970s were a time of great transformation, not only politically and socially but also in the spiritual realm. The Catholic Church faced significant challenges, liturgical changes, growing secularization, and a crisis of faith. This era was marked by a desperate search for answers amid confusion, as society increasingly distanced itself from Christian values. The message from Akita came as a warning, a call to return to faith in times of uncertainty. How does this message resonate in our current context? Imagine living in a time when ancestral traditions were constantly questioned, and what was once sacred seemed to lose its relevance. The apparitions in Akita occurred precisely in this climate of spiritual disconnection. The message from the Virgin Mary, centered on prayer and penance, appeared as a direct response to this crisis, reminding us that even amid chaos, faith in Jesus Christ remains our anchor. What lessons should we draw from this divine response? The story of Akita urges us to examine how social and cultural movements have influenced the spiritual lives of Christians. It serves as a reminder that, in the face of crisis, faith should not be abandoned but strengthened. This apparition has become a beacon in the darkness, guiding the lost toward the light of the gospel. How do these messages of hope and warning unfold? It leads us to delve deeper into the prophecies revealed at Akita. The messages that Sister Agnes Sasagawa received from the Virgin Mary in Akita are an urgent call to conversion and prayer. The Virgin warned that humanity was turning away from God, sinking into a tide of wickedness and corruption. Her words were not of condemnation, but those of a worried mother, seeing her children heading towards self-destruction. The message was clear: only through prayer and penance could a great punishment threatening the world be avoided. But how can we interpret these warnings today? The prophecy of Akita was not just a warning, it was a call to action. It spoke of a dark future, where faith would be tested to its limits, and those who remained firm would be few. This great punishment, according to the Virgin, could be avoided if people turned back to God, rediscovering the importance of spirituality and devotional life. It's as if Akita resonates with the words of Jesus in the Gospel, where he constantly calls his disciples to spiritual vigilance. What implications does this have for our current spiritual lives? It is crucial to reflect on how these prophecies directly affect us. In a world where religion is often relegated, the words of the Virgin at Akita challenge us to reconsider our priorities. They invite us to look at the future seriously but also with hope, knowing that change is still possible. Before fully understanding what this great punishment means, we must delve deeper into what has been revealed, particularly in terms of its spiritual and material dimensions. What discoveries might emerge from this exploration? The prophecies of Akita not only warned of a great material punishment, but also of a spiritual crisis that would precede this event. The Virgin Mary highlighted that the loss of faith and moral decay would be the first signs of this punishment, affecting not only the world but also the Church itself. Imagine a scenario where internal divisions, corruption, and a lack of spiritual fervor weaken the strength of the Church, undermining the faith of millions. This kind of invisible punishment may be the most devastating, as it corrodes the soul from within. How can we protect ourselves from this unseen threat? The material punishment, on the other hand, was described as an inevitable consequence if humanity did not repent. The Virgin spoke of natural disasters and tribulations that would shake the earth, reminding us that prayer, praise, and worship are our only defenses against these catastrophic events. For those living Christianity intensely, this is a call to action. Participating in the sacraments, engaging in Bible study, and strengthening the community of young Christians are practical ways to spiritually prepare for what may come. How can we apply these teachings to our daily lives? These warnings from Akita lead us to a deep reflection on the current state of faith in the world. It is a call for each person to evaluate their spiritual life and make the necessary changes before it is too late. The punishment mentioned by the Virgin is not just a punishment but a natural consequence of turning away from God. But what else can we learn from these messages? How do they connect to other Marian apparitions, like those of Fatima? Is there an even deeper connection to explore? The apparitions of Akita share a fascinating connection with the messages of Fatima, particularly concerning the third secret. In both cases, the Virgin Mary warned the world about the urgent need for conversion, prayer, and penance. The third secret of Fatima, which spoke of a great crisis in the Church and a potential punishment for humanity, seems to resonate with the prophecies of Akita. It is almost as if Akita is a continuation, a reinforcement of the same message, adapted to the context of the 1970s. What other revelations could be related? This connection between Fatima and Akita suggests that the apparitions are not isolated events, but part of a larger plan by God to guide humanity through times of darkness. The similarities in the messages lead us to question the true listening and action in response to these divine warnings. The insistence on the need for prayer, especially the Rosary, and active participation in the sacraments calls us to a renewed commitment to our faith. It is a reminder that spirituality is not static, but a constant call to transformation. How can we respond to this call? The bond between Fatima and Akita also invites us to reflect on the relevance of these apparitions today. The messages from both events have not lost their urgency. Perhaps they have never been more necessary than now. These messages urge us to examine the spiritual condition of the world and to act before it is too late. But how can we respond to this invitation? What can we do to follow this call? The answer may lie in simple yet powerful actions that strengthen our faith and bring us closer to God. What steps can we take to follow this path? The messages from Akita were not just warnings but a clear call to spiritual action. The Virgin Mary urged us to intensify our prayer life, especially through the recitation of the Rosary, which is a powerful weapon against evil. Regular participation in the sacraments, such as confession and the Eucharist, was also emphasized, as these practices strengthen our connection with God and help us live according to the teachings of the Gospel. In a world that often distracts us from what truly matters, these spiritual actions anchor us in faith and protect us from temptation. But what other practical ways can we find to live a deeper faith? Additionally, the call to penance was central to the messages of Akita. Penance is not just an act of sacrifice, but a path of inner transformation, where we acknowledge our failures and commit to change. This can be done practically, through fasting, charity, and abstinence, which help us develop a deeper spirituality and resist the pressures of the modern world. These practices remind us that, despite difficulties, there is always a way to renew our faith and draw closer to God. How can we incorporate these practices into our daily lives? This call to spiritual action, so present in Akita, resonates urgently in our time. The message from the Virgin is clear. Action is required now, to strengthen our faith and spiritually prepare for future challenges. Each prayer, every act of penance, and participation in the sacraments is a step toward that preparation. But there is something more, a connection that leads us to reflect even more deeply on these messages. Surprisingly, this reflection leads us to the figure of a contemporary young man, Carlo Acutis, who has a unique connection with the messages of Akita. Carlo Acutis, a young man who lived in the modern era and is already considered blessed, seems to have a spiritual connection with the messages of Akita. Just as Sister Agnes Sasagawa was chosen to receive the messages of the Virgin Mary, Carlo was chosen to be a living example of faith, especially for young Christians. His deep love for the Eucharist and his zeal for documenting Eucharistic miracles around the world reflect the same spiritual urgency found in the apparitions of Akita. Carlo understood, from a young age, that faith had to be lived concretely and that spirituality had to be the center of our existence. What more can we discover about this connection? Carlo's life is a testimony that resonates with the messages of Akita regarding the need for conversion and prayer. He used the technology of his time to evangelize, creating a website that cataloged Eucharistic miracles and spreading the message of Christ to every corner of the world. Carlo firmly believed that, just as the Virgin Mary warned in Akita, the world urgently needed a spiritual renewal. He is a modern example of how devotion and a testimony of faith can influence generations, inspiring them to follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. But what miraculous event could connect Carlo even further with the messages of Akita? However, the connection between Carlo Acutis and the apparitions of Akita does not end there. There is a miraculous event related to Carlo that suggests not only that he shared the messages, but also that he was an instrument of these messages in our time. This opens a new chapter in understanding the prophecies and divine signs, inviting us to dive even deeper into his life and legacy. What is this miraculous event? How does it relate to the warnings given in Akita? This mystery leaves us eager to explore further. After learning about the messages of Akita and seeing how they connect with the signs of the times, it becomes impossible to ignore the call to action. Have you ever thought about how your life could change if you followed these pieces of advice? Perhaps it is time to intensify your prayer life, participate more actively in the sacraments, or even begin a devotion to the Rosary. What if these simple but powerful practices could really make a difference in your life and in the lives of those around you? So, how about starting right now? Make a list of the small steps you can take toward a deeper spirituality. This could be setting aside daily time for prayer or maybe studying more about the apparitions of the Virgin Mary. Remember, every little effort counts, and you are not alone on this journey. After all, Carlo Acutis, with his example of living faith, showed us that we can all be instruments of change, even amid modern challenges. So, are you ready to respond to this call? What is holding you back from taking the next step in your spiritual journey? If this video has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Together, we will continue exploring these mysteries of faith and finding the answers that the world so desperately needs.